With the rise of TikTok and Harry Potter being a pretty popular topic on the internet, we have seen a rise in fan casts that have delved even more into a bigger aspect of the community. Of course, what I'm talking about is the group that has been deemed the Slytherin boys and the elusive nature of it. I think a lot of people are confused on who they are, where they came from, and a little of why they're in the community. So I'm just going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into all of that. And I do just want to do a heads up. It is very hard to find information that is accurate on these people. A lot of this stuff is speculation or fan-made based on the resources I have found, but I tried to look at everything I could. But unlike the Marauders, the Slytherin boys are not well built and quite all over the place. So I do just want to give a heads up to that. So first, I want to mention the main characters of Harry Potter that are still in the Slytherin boys. And by that, I mean Draco and Blaise. So Draco is, of course, played by Tom Felton. He doesn't really have another fan cast. In older Wattpad books, you'll see him as maybe Lucky Blue Smith, usually. But that's not really the Slytherin boys. That's usually 2016 Wattpad talking, you know? It's usually Tom Felton. And he honestly is not a huge part of the community. You'll see him in fan fictions, you'll see him in Tumblr one-shots, you'll see him in AO3 tags. But his presence is not as much as you would think for being the main Slytherin boy of Canon. And before I go into any of this, I'm just going to give you a few term definitions. Canon, fanon. Canon is basically just stuff that's in the books, confirmed, something that actually happened, while fanon is something that the fandom has made up and created for their sake. Fanon and fancast are the same thing. Fancasts are just actors or people casted in a role by fans. It's in the name. Draco is usually the same person he is. He's not really any different in personality. Same family, honestly. Like, the only difference is some fan fictions you'll find his personality a little bit different, but that's just author preference. Now, the next person I want to cover is going to be Blaise. And the only reason I'm covering him a little bit more in depth is because he has a little bit of a strange situation. I find that he's often fan casted, even though he has a perfectly fine actor. So Blaise is played by Louis Cordyce. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing anybody's names in this video, by the way. He's mainly played by, he is played by Louis. But for some reason people, I don't know if they don't like Louis or what, but they have seemed to deem Reese King as the new Blaise. You'll often see him in a lot of fanfiction gifs, or if you look on a fan cast list of a Wattpad book, he'll be casted as Blaise, and it makes no sense because Blaise already has a face. Like, I'm gonna get into Theodore Nott really in depth, but like Theodore Nott, he doesn't have a face, so like obviously you want to give him one, but Blaise does. Strange. Just a little background on Blaise in case you're not familiar with him. He was born to a very beautiful mother who is widowed 7 times, and they get their riches from her dead husband, so a little bit suspicious, but it's his backstory. It's what we got in the books. It's what we're gonna stay getting. So he's rich from maybe murder money. Who knows? Blaise is, of course, a pureblood, and he's on Quidditch. He is, I think, a chaser. And he's on Quidditch with Draco, who's a seeker, obviously. We see that in the movies. He is usually in fan fictions as some of the main friends. He's usually more on an outgoing side, but he's not as much of a bully, I would say. I usually find him more just being the background friend, but who's still outgoing and is in like every party scene, but for some reason doesn't have a bigger part. So he's there, he exists, and people acknowledge him. He's just not as big of a part as all the created characters, of course. Now next, I want to go into Lorenzo Berkshire. I'm going to be honest, where the hell did he come from? So he came from a Draco fanfiction on Wattpad by the user Baby Naomi, sorry. And it's called Filthy if you want to look it up. I'm sure it's still up and running. That is his first appearance, of course, but I'm sure nowadays you can find him in many other newer Harry Potter fics. He's often played by Louis Partridge. Love him and Olivia, by the way. He doesn't really have a story to him, honestly, and his personality is very all over the place. I don't think people can really pinpoint who he is, and I think everybody just needs to come to a consensus, because every fanfiction of him is different. I find that he's usually personality swapped with Theodore Nott. If Lorenzo's nice, then Theodore will be mean. If Theodore's nice, then Lorenzo's mean. If you're anywhere on the shifting community of Harry Potter, he's often described as mean. I don't know if that's accurate. I couldn't say that for myself. I have no experience with that one-on-one. That is just what a lot of people say, but then people are also like, I haven't experienced that in my DR, so I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, his personality is all over the place. I really think it just depends on author preference of what they want to make him. So he's a fan cast, he's never been real, he has no real value to the story. He just exists because of his creation, and people have really, I guess, they thought he was attractive and wanted him in more fanfics. I guess that's where he came from. So that's Lorenzo. Short and sweet, I guess. I was gonna cover Theodore next, but I have a lot on Theodore, so I'm gonna cover Mattheo. A lot of people pronounce his name differently. We're gonna pronounce it as Mattheo. So if you don't pronounce it that way, I'm so sorry. Okay. And of course I'm talking about Mattheo Riddle. Now he's kind of an interesting character. He's played by Benjamin Wadsworth in his Deadly Class role. That show should have never been cancelled, by the way. He's most often described as Tom Riddle's son, but I have seen a few fanfictions where he's Tom Riddle's brother, which doesn't make sense because Tom Riddle's from the 40s. Which also adds another layer, because then there's Tom Riddle in Harry Potter era, and then there's no Voldemort, and then there's an even more confusing line of where this all goes down. But he's mostly described as Voldemort's son, you know? A lot of times he is described as being Bellatrix's son as well, so Voldemort and Bellatrix would have a little connection. I also saw somewhere that said he was Cascade Trelawney's son, and then I looked her up and I couldn't find any information on her. I don't think she exists, so I don't think that's true. Usually he just has an unnamed mother, or it is Bellatrix. Take with what you got. Now he has a pretty cohesive personality in fanfics. He's usually a pretty heavy smoker. He's described to be very violent. He gets into fights a lot, and I think it's because of the one gif of Benjamin Wadsworth in Deadly Class where he's like bruised and bleeding. So I think people just took that and said, yeah, this man's gonna fight for us. He was created by Yasmin Amaro on a Wattpad story called Possessive in 2020. It's since been deleted, so you can't read it. I'm sure people have like posted it or something, but you can't read it originally. And he has fanfictions on AO3 dating back to September of 2021. So he's been around for 3 to 4 years, which is kind of crazy for a created character. He's also known to be a bit of a bully compared to the others. He's usually the most kind of bully. He's very protective over the ex-reader, of course, or the main character. He's described to be very intelligent and smart, but a lot of it gets kind of fucked up by his like for fighting, because that kind of puts him in the delinquent category. He's also often described to be on the Quidditch team. His role is often switched around, but he is a Quidditch boy, so the fandom says. Any of these backstories from Lorenzo or Mattheo are in fact fan created usually. They don't have specific backstories. It's usually just fanfic by fanfic, a different story to fit their storyline. So they don't have set ones. Matteo's honestly one of the only characters that has a set personality that is pretty consistent through every fanfiction. It's hard to find one where he's not a bit violent, not a bit mean. Like, yeah, I mean, he's Voldemort's son. I feel like he's obviously gonna be a bitch, you know? And before I get to Theodore Nott, I just want to mention the lack of Crabbe and Goyle. They're not in fanfictions. Like, they've been deleted. I don't know if it's because they're ugly, less attractive, sorry, or because I don't know if it's because of that, but they're nowhere. I don't think I've found a single fanfiction where Crabbe and Goyle exist and it's not in the regular timeline rather than the Slytherin boys timeline. So, lastly, I'm going to cover Theodore Nott. Now, he's kind of a confusing character because he's not fanon. He's a canon character. He's in the books and has an kind of insane amount of information on him. So he doesn't have a face to him, but the fandom has deemed him as Lorenzo Zerzolo, who's an Italian actor most known for Baby. Gorgeous man. Oh my god. I don't blame the fandom for doing that. But I'm just gonna go over some of his character from the books and a little of his history. So he's a pureblood raised by his older father after his mother died, and he's one of the 3 characters in the books that can see Thestrals, because he did witness his mother dying. He actually has a bit of a distaste for them and shows a disliking to how they act. In the books, there was a scene where some of the Death Eater students were like outed, and Hermione pointed out Theodore, and Harry had no reaction to him. So whether or not he was a bully at Hogwarts, probably not true because we do have some other information on him, but Harry doesn't really care about Theodore Nott. He's not a staple in the books enough for him to care. He was also an incredibly smart kid who was actually described as a loner and tall, lanky, skinny. He was also described as stringy and weedy. He was 1 in 4 students to make Newt like potion levels or something, and he made 2 illegal time turners, which not a lot of wizards could do. He is in fact a blood supremacist, probably due to the fact that his father is a Death Eater. There's a scene in the books where Slughorn is asking Blaise about Theodore Nott's father, and Blaise talks about how his father is a Death Eater and went to Azkaban pretty recently due to him breaking into the Department of Mysteries, which then leads Slughorn to invite Blaise to the Slug Club rather than Theodore. So Theodore honestly is the whole reason Blaise is in the Slug Club. So he kind of has a weirdly large role for a background character in Slytherin. Now, all of that is canon and has actually happened, and does exist if you read the books. Now, if we're getting to the fanon part, let me go over that for you. Now, he is also a smoker. I'd say he's not as described as a smoker as Mattheo, but he definitely is often smoking in fan fictions. He's also Italian. He's not in the books. I think it's because his actor Lorenzo is Italian, so it's just playing homage to his fan cast. But in a lot of fan fictions, you'll see him either with an Italian accent or speaking Italian. You don't really find any that. I mean, you can find some where he's not, but it is more common too. He's more described as outgoing. There is a couple of times in stories where he's described as quiet and with a book. But like I said, he's often swapped with Lorenzo in personalities. I mostly see Theodore as the more outgoing and loud person, and Lorenzo's the quieter one, but it does depend. He is Mattheo's best friend, and he is sometimes a bully, and he sometimes gets into fights, and he low-key doesn't care about blood supremacy. I haven't seen a lot of stuff where he hates muggles or people with different blood statuses. I think just fanfics don't really write that a lot, but I don't think he's really that much compared to some of the others. Now I do just want to mention Tom Riddle, because he is a big part, whether it's Mattheo's brother or father. If he's the brother, he's usually played by Christian Coulson, of course. But if Tom is the father of Mattheo, usually he's not his snake-like character, and rather played by Tom Hughes from a British TV show I can't remember the name of. It's like a mystery one, I think. He's also often described to be a little bit rich, which is different because he grew up in an orphanage, so I don't know where he got that money, but he did. And he also is often described as in a romantic relationship with Bellatrix, probably due to the fact that Mattheo exists, and it's probably some sort of romantic thing relating to that. All of these characters, fanon or not, you will find in fanfics drinking, smoking, having parties, having sex. They're very like normal teenagers in the modern century, even though this is technically supposed to take place in the 90s. I don't know. Anyways, those are all the characters, and there's no specific storyline like the Marauders, so I can't dive into the timeline for you and tell you about every little event that's happened in the history, because there's no specific correlation between all these characters. They just exist as characters for people to write about. Mattheo and Theodore have a lot of fanfics for themselves as the main love interest. Like, these characters are big in the community, and for no reason. How did you guys even find out about Theodore? Did you just look for other Slytherin people in the book that had names? Like, where did he come from? Like, how did you get him? How'd you pull him out of the books? Anyways, any other characters being created are not one of the main people. These are all the main people. People creating others just want to be a part of the fun. Also, I don't know how I feel about all these characters, but I do like me some Lorenzo Zerzolo and Benjamin Wadsworth, so I'm taking what I'm getting. Anyways, hope you enjoyed a little. This wasn't even a deep dive, but this is literally all the information you can get. Like, they are so uncohesive. It's crazy. But I know a lot of people are confused about who they are, so I just wanted to explain, as I think I'm like the number one knower here. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is my first one. Bye.